So let me introduce you as one of the senior Heilkunst practitioners and entrepreneurs, and someone that everybody around the world needs to get to know because you are our kind of guy. You always have some of the best ideas and things like that. So, without further ado, Jeff, why don't you go ahead and tell us what you do and how you do it, and we'll just have fun from there. Talk to you later.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for having me on your podcast. This is actually quite a thrill for me. I love podcasting for one, the conversations and just this nice new format that we all have access to. But especially what we're talking about is Heilkunst, which is kind of the best thing to talk about. There's all kinds of podcasts. I've been listening to them for many years, but I'm always thinking in the back of my mind, where's the Heilkunst podcast? Where could it be? So yeah, I will certainly talk about a lot of good things in this conversation today. And yeah, I'll start a little bit with my own story. We can unfold some of the details as we go through today, but basically it's kind of a story of finding my objective desire function. As a young man, I didn't even know what that concept was, or I didn't know that that's what I was looking for. But it's truly what happened. It's the old cliche about young people going off to travel the world to find themselves. Well, I guess I didn't find myself, but Heilkunst found me, right? My objective desire function found me. And I guess the really the beginning of that story, and how I would kind of put my beginnings in Heilkunst, even before Heilkunst, even before homeopathy, even um, even before I was deeply interested in natural health and nutrition and all these other things. We'll get to that part of my story as well. But I was in university and I was actually studying the psychology program, and that was kind of interesting in itself. I had kind of gotten on that track from a little seed that got planted in me in my high school days. I actually was in my high school library, imagine that, and looking at the different bookshelves, and there was this book that really grabbed my attention. Up until then, I had been, the typical math and science student and computer science and, the geek or nerd, whatever you call that type of student. But there in the library was Carl Jung's book, a great, beautiful, big hardcover of Man and His Symbols. Beautiful book with all the colorful illustrations and everything. But I took that out, I took that home, and I was going through. This was a whole new world to me. This wasn't the math and science and computer world that I knew about. This was the world of dreams and the human unconscious. And anyways, something really awoke in me, and that got me on my path to do that psychology program in university. And the reason I'm telling you all of this is a major event happened for me in university, and that was in taking the mandatory statistics class. And and again, even me being a math head and everything, it still wasn't that exciting of a course, right? It was something that it was a slog and all these formulas, and it was it was kind of difficult to get one's head around. It's like, oh, how do you do all these these equations and everything, and what is the prof trying to get out of me? But what pertinent to this story, the actually the professor in that class was a visiting professor that year. He wasn't a regular professor for the program, for the university, and he taught very differently. So the first number of weeks of the course, he taught the philosophy of science. Before we dove into the formulas and the equations and the graphs and everything else, he gave us several weeks on the philosophy of science, and that was really interesting to me. I never had studied anything like that. But little did I know, it woke up this little voice inside of me that was my objective desire function, philosophy of science. How do we know things? And you don't just jump into formulas and practical things, but you kind of have to know where you're jumping from, and where you're jumping to. What are we trying to do? What problems are we trying to solve? So, anyways, I'm just giving this as an origin in my story, even before natural health, before homeopathy, before Heilkunst, this little baby version of my objective desire function was woken up in the question of the philosophy of science. So I'll kind of open that up there. We'll kind of get more proper into Heilkunst. But Paul, why don't you kind of pull a thread out that interests you, or kind of direct us in a new direction here?
Okay, Jeff, why don't you just tell us? I mean, you have a unique journey to Heilkunst. That's what everybody else is going to want to know. Because I remember I was told as I was getting ready to start, I said, you do not have an opportunity, or the opportunity that you must take is you can't take people to a place you've never been before yourself. So, how did you come about your journey to Heilkunst? Because that's unique. It's unique to you. And it's very telling, of course. How in the world did you go from where you were to actually, starting your journey to Heilkunst? Whether it would be, see, mine um, was treatment, general treatment, and starting school at the same time. Because I was told that by Jason Wood, who was the registrar at the time, he says, Paul, you can't take a patient to a place you've never been yourself. So that made sense to me. So I'm going to be in general treatment. I'm going to be starting school. And that's the way it is. So it all unfolded at the same time. And I would imagine most students that was not the case for them, and certainly older students like myself. So why don't you go ahead and tell us, Jeff, what was your path to Heilkunst?
Thank you for that, Paul. Thank you, first of all, for keeping us on track. I am Mr. Tangent, as we may be finding out soon enough. But we also want to thank you for bringing in this most essential point about Heilkunst therapeutics and the process of treatment. This basic idea, as you brought out, that you cannot, you being the practitioner, you cannot bring your patient to a greater level of health than you yourself have attained, or the way you said it, you can't bring someone somewhere that you haven't been yourself. If you're going to go on a guided tour of a whatever, a famous mountain, or a famous cultural piece of architecture, whatever it is, you hope and you need and you want that the guide has not only been there, but they understand what it means, right? So now when they take you, they can guide you to have a full experience of whatever that thing is. Anyway, so thank you for that. That is such an essential point. And yeah, to your encouragement as well, to kind of continue on with my story. So on this point of you basically having this deep personal understanding and knowledge of oneself and one's own journey, even before you even think of taking somebody else on their journey, is what I was saying earlier. This idea of the objective desire function. I think in one way or another, I said I didn't even know what that was. When I first started having this awakening experience, who am I and what really lights me up in the world, because that's unique, right? That's very individual. Before having that experience, or even before having the concept, I was just kind of going along on my life path, going over here, going over there. Maybe I'll try this, maybe I'll try that, and that's fair enough. That's where we start, right? We start as kind of these these earthbound wanderers. We're wandering along, and what's over here, what's over there? But sooner or later, we start to have some form of these inner experiences where that very unique inner objective desire function, as I've named it, really starts to awaken in us. Now, that can be at a very small level, little life experiences where either we get excited by something or maybe we get irritated by something. We kind of have these experiences which strike a charge within us, so-called positive or negative, and it's really what's behind that charge that really speaks to this core question we're talking about. Who are you? what lights you up, what is that path that's kind of been predefined inside of you, and now this is the task of healing. This is the task of of kind of following this Heilkunst path and this journey is finding out what that is inside of you. So now a lot of people, they may have that concept, I want to discover my true self and what I'm supposed to do in the world, but it's a great difficulty and frustration because, well, for all various reasons, it's kind of a buried treasure, right? It's buried within us, sometimes buried so well that it takes all kinds of life experiences and you know, plus, positive, minus, and until we really start to unravel what that is. So, anyways, I'm talking kind of at the conceptual level here, and it's all true. But as far as my personal journey, I kind of left us off at the point of being in that statistics class in my psychology program, and the this great inner experience of really being lit up, like, oh, philosophy of science, what is truth, what is knowledge, what is the method of science, what is, even such basic questions of what is measurement. We can take that for granted and think, well, I don't know, I'll weigh it, I'll measure it with a ruler, we just think that's an easy question. And it is easy on the quantitative side, but when we get deep into life energy, the measuring someone's health and their health progress, if they're kind of on an improvement trajectory, or things getting worse, that this idea of measurement, we have to go into new territory now in Heilkunst, because now we're getting into qualitative measurement, and that's possible. That is such a thing. But as I say, to our first assumption, from the philosophy of science and from normal allopathic science, is like, oh, well, I'll just quantitatively measure it, and all the things I said, and that's supposed to give us the clear and easy answers, right? There's much kind of confusion about science on this front, especially when we come into the life sciences. That we need, as much as we need quantitative measurement that has a role, but way beyond that, we need these qualitative measurements. So, anyways, I didn't have this fully fleshed out in my mind at that time. This was just kind of waking up in me by this course. My objective desire function raised its hand and said, "Oh, me, pick me. I want to follow these questions. I want to learn more about this." So, anyways, this was, as I had said previously, this was way before even I was deep into natural health and diet, and then of course homeopathy and Heilkunst. This was just a very first awakening that was happening in me. So if you fast forward, as I come into my first class with Rudy Verspor, studying Heilkunst, and some of what he was teaching us in those very early lectures was this whole idea of you already spoke to this, Paul. This idea of taking somebody on their journey. You cannot do that, or rather, you cannot take them to a place that you have not gone yourself. So that, again, this is a qualitative discussion we're getting into. What is that experience of encountering your objective desire? What does it feel like? What does it feel like not to have it? And kind of the frustration in life of that. So without having gone through that myself, encountering the objective desire and watching that process unfold over many years, of course, now I am in a position to be able to see that in somebody else. Have they had an awakening to what that is in themselves? As I say, it's their own unique content, their own unique desire, but the form of it is something that I can identify now and speak to. So yeah, this is, the further and further you take somebody on this Heilkunst journey. Of course, we have timeline and we have nutrition, and we have all these components, but they're really designed to bring somebody further and further to that point where they can have that confrontation, which, as I say, some people consciously know they're looking for it. Other people kind of have an unknown awakening. Oh, I had this life experience, all this stuff woken. And one way or another, as I said, whatever their individual content is, this, my Heilkunst practice today is more and more and more attuned to this level of healing, this level of the human being really awakening to themselves, that yes, with all the technicalities of Heilkunst, as I said, the timeline and nutrition and all these other things, those are only steps to bring somebody to the point where that becomes a possibility, a very dynamic possibility. So yeah, so there I was in my statistics class, having this awakening experience, and from there, as I say, the path kind of unfolded. I did come into natural health. I did come into homeopathy and then Heilkunst, and yeah, there I was in Rudy's first class, and he's saying these things that are just kind of rocking my world, right? Like, as I say, you already brought one example up, this idea of you can't take somebody further than you've gone. But he also said something kind of on a similar line, which, it took me kind of a long time to really unpack the meaning of it. He said something seemingly very counterintuitive, and that is that what is it that well, as you say, you already said that you can't bring someone further than you've gone yourself, but he also said that the structure of treatment, the purpose of it, from the practitioner's point of view, is not to help the patient, but it's to save yourself. Well, that's kind of strange and bizarre. And well, aren't we in the helping profession? And aren't we trying to help people heal and restore their health and all this? Well, in a sense, at one superficial level, yes, we're doing that. But yeah, this profound um, statement that he made, that we're not there for the patient, we're there to save ourselves. So, as I say, I've kind of spent years and years processing and unpacking the meaning of that. But maybe, yeah, this is a good point for me to hand it back to you, Paul, and yeah, get some of your good feedback and guidance again. But yeah, that was like being struck by a lightning bolt that I didn't even see coming.
Hey, Jeff, I understand what you're saying. It's all good. Now, what's the most important thing that you think people ought to know about what you do and how you do it? Because that's where the rubber meets the road. So, share with everybody, if you would, the real, uh, the real Jeff Korentayer and how you interact with patients. I mean, what's your ideal patient look like? If someone wanted to be a patient with you, what kind of um, average problems or complaints would they be complaining of? Things like that.
That's a good question, and of course, our life, our world, our modern experience is very practical. Where does the rubber hit the road, and let's keep this real, and no abstract theories, no philosophies. I get that. I get the sentiment of that, and of course, even in a clinical setting, people are coming for a reason, right? Whatever their symptoms are, whatever their health disturbance is, they want a real practical result, and they want to know how long is it going to take? How many sessions? We only have so much insurance and so much budget, and what are you proposing here? It's like I get it. I get those questions. I'm human too. When I have a problem, a health problem or otherwise, I want reality. I want a solution, and I want it now. I get it. I get that. I get that so much. No, and I'm not trying to diss your question, but I'm just trying to put it into our bigger framework here. Yes, in my practice, there's all kinds of complaints and symptoms and what people are bringing, and we deal with them head on. All the classics. Everything from skin issues and sleep disturbances, and mental emotional issues, anxieties and other consequences of anxiety, and the whole world of all of that just fills my day-to-day life, right? In and out of clinic, hour by hour, day by day. It's like these are the details of people's health and their life, and it just keeps coming and coming and coming. This is reality in that sense. I'm not putting it down, I'm not dismissing it, but there's kind of a bigger framework, a bigger question here. Kind of the threads we've been weaving already in the conversation is, what, like, when, and this really gets to the heart of Heilkunst. I'll say more about this in just a second, but this whole idea of what are these deeper rational principles which make Heilkunst work on a predictable, repeatable basis, right? Because if we only started and stayed with the questions of practicality, keep it real, keep it practical, let's get a result, that sounds good at first, but then the more you kind of reflect on that and work with that, it's like, well, wait a minute, you have to start asking the bigger questions. What does it mean to have a result? What does it mean to get rid of a symptom? As I say, face value, it seems quite obvious what it means, but no, it's not so obvious, because there are ways, well, there are millions of ways of getting rid of a symptom. Look at all of Western medicine, which actually make the patient's state of health worse. So they were keeping it real, keeping it practical, but they're making the patient's health worse. So is that very real, and is that very practical in terms of what we really want here? So anyway, so this whole idea of, I say, I'm not dissing you, Paul, but we have to keep expanding our way of thinking to really grasp the meaning and the method of Heilkunst. It's not empirical and it's not practical. I mean, it is practical. It does practically get rid of people's symptoms and improve their health and do all these things, but it does it in a way where their deeper health and their deeper consciousness is actually progressing, is actually moving forward. And this idea of moving forward is deeply rooted to consciousness. When we look at the human being, yes, the human being has a physical body and all of its functions and everything, but that's not fundamentally what a human being is. A human being fundamentally is a unit of consciousness, and this idea of moving forward, that phrase I just said, is an evolutionary concept, right? It's human consciousness that evolves before anything about the human physical body changes or evolves. If we could look back at the history of the humans and all the animals on the earth and everything else, talk about the ideas of evolution. Sure, we can look at all the physical aspects of that. Oh, there was this feature of this animal changed into this feature of that animal, and so on and so on. Fair enough, but it's not the deepest understanding of the earth, of consciousness, which, as I'm saying, is an evolutionary process. So bringing it back to our more constrained health conversation, what is health, and how do you improve someone's health, and what do you want to what we get as a result? It begins and ends more at this level of human consciousness as an evolutionary process moving forward from one developmental stage to another. Just like when we watch our children grow up, we're watching for all the stages. Okay, now they learn to walk, and now they're saying their first word, and now this, and it's like there's a progression and a development that we're watching for. And say, oh, my children is my child's doing so well, and they're so healthy, and they're so great, and all these things. Of course, you were watching for this development. Now, to kind of wrap this part of our conversation all up, back to where you set me off on this question, Paul. What are people coming with? As I already mentioned, the whole range of everything. Hour by hour, day by day. We're a general practice at Arcanum, so we see every possible condition you can imagine, from the physical, the mental, the emotional. Of course, the whole Heilkunst, the modality, not the bigger philosophy, but the modality is really built on this sequential timeline therapy, this whole idea of identifying and removing all the shocks and the traumas that someone has engendered in their system, from car accidents to emotional trauma to all the things that really can disturb the course of our life and our life functioning and everything. These big life events we go through, even small events. Somebody takes a course of antibiotics or something else, that can often be a part of their timeline event. But all of this to say that, yes, we can talk about all the practical things. Here's a case of eczema. Here's a case of obstructed bowel disorder. Here's a case of this. Here's a case of that. Here's how we're going to treat it. Here's how we're going to get rid of the symptoms. But whether the patient has a high or low or very low degree of consciousness about their life and about themselves, many patients are solely focused on the physical. Here's my symptom. Give me a remedy. Get rid of the symptom, please. That's very practical and real. I get it, but as I say, some of them, a lot of them, can have a very low consciousness that whatever that physical symptom is actually speaking to a much deeper consciousness that's impaired in their development. So, what would be an example of that? Let's say, let's take the classic homeopathic remedy of Natrum muriaticum, the big grief remedy, the loss and sadness remedy. It can have one of its characteristic physical symptoms can be chronic constipation. And that's of course related to that classic emotion in that mirror of the grief, that lack of letting go of the past. For them, it shows up in their physical body as chronic constipation. So yeah, to your question, what are the common complaints? As I say, the complaints are many and varied. They go through across the whole spectrum. But the question I'm always meditating on for each patient, to understand them and what's going on and how we move them forward, is how awake or how asleep are they in their consciousness about their health, about their symptom, and about all these things. So, and here's the always the surprising and amazing thing. I can begin with a patient. I often do, where they're at one level of consciousness. I have a pain, I have a symptom, I have a physical problem. Okay, that's good. That's fair enough. That's great. But then over the course of time, as we're dealing with their physical problem, constipation, whatever it is, and that's improving, we're going through the process, treating the timeline, this, that, and everything else. And it often quite surprises me, someone who initially comes to me in quite a state of being asleep or even semi-unconscious. um, this process starts to unfold, and they start to awaken to life, to consciousness, to who they really are, to what we talked about in the recent video segments about the objective desire function and what someone's real purpose is. That's quite a sight to behold. It's like, yeah, not only is the symptom improving and the physical health improving, but you actually start getting an awake human being. Imagine that.
Jeff, you make a great point, and you've opened up a can of worms here. So I'm going to go ahead and put a worm on a hook, or a few worms on a hook, and start fishing. So um, the concept of spiritual translocation really is the crux of the matter. So we think we're doing a good job, but are we really? If all we've done is translocated a disease and it goes someplace else, well, okay, it's kind of like palliation. You drive the pathology deeper into the body and it comes back worse than it was. The same thing with these spirits, okay, that are behind these diseases. If we don't annihilate them, if we don't transform them, and of course, we transform them in actuality by the love of the Christ force. So I'll just say that for that. If anybody's listening to this, they want to get that book, Spiritual Translocation by Ari Thorson. I think it's page 54, where it talks about all the family members need to be treated. You're not doing anybody any favors, because all that'll happen with these diseases, instead of being transformed, they'll be translocated to other family members, to the pets, or if you have a farm, on the farm animals, wherever that is. So we've got to take care of business. So net, we need to annihilate these diseases that are so problematic and not translocate them. And then we make the world a better place versus the same or worse. So I'll just leave it at that. But Jeff, thanks for your perspectives on that. I didn't think there was anything that I was saying that was marginal, or or not respectable. But I appreciate your perspectives on just exactly what you had to say.
Thanks, Paul. I love that word and that concept of spiritual translocation. We're talking about health and disease and where things go. The old sweeping things under the rug analogy is perfectly appropriate for healthcare. It's what we don't want to do. Right? We want to move things out, get the dust out of the house, not under the rug. But yeah, what you're maybe inadvertently doing, but you're doing such a good job at this through our conversation here, is bringing me back to our core storyline, right? So we're talking about these great concepts, the direction of cure and moving things out and not suppressing, and all the things we want in healthcare and the principles of Heilkunst. But yeah, as I say, you're bringing me back to our core storyline here, which is my personal development, because yeah, there's nothing more informative in a sense than a personal story, right? Somebody's life story, how somebody learned something, how they came to point A, B, or C of their life. And yeah, so bringing us back there, the next phase of my life, earlier in our segments, I was talking about university and studying statistics and studying the philosophy of science. But very shortly after that, my next phase of education, it was partially simultaneous, it was overlapping, was working at a pretty typical health food store, all the organic foods and all the supplements. And the kind of crowd that shops at a health food store were kind of my next teachers, right? My next phase. I mean, this wasn't formal education. I wasn't getting any kind of diploma or anything like that. I was just working in a health food store. But, all these, I mean, the people who worked there, but really all the clients of the store, and how they lived their life, how they came in and asked questions, what they were looking for, what kind of supplements they were looking for, the classic health food store question, do you have something for fill in the blank? This is of course one of the major lines of communication in the natural health movement. It's just the allopathic movement dressed up in a slightly different language, right? So it's still allopathic. In other words, this is kind of a bit of the problem, a bit of the unfortunate thing with the natural health movement, is it's still operating as allopathy, as the whole allopathic medical model, but it's just kind of dressing itself up in a different Halloween costume, so to speak. So anyways, this was my next stage of evolution, learning from all these customers and how they're living their life, what kind of healthcare they're applying to themselves, everything from nutrition and supplements, and of course, all the alternative medical modalities, from all the body work and all the all the different, the new natural health technologies, the magnetic systems and this, that, and the other thing. So I'm absorbing all of this, but as I already alluded to, we're still in the realm of allopathic medicine, as pure and healthy as the natural health people think they are. I mean, they are on one level. They're not using all the toxic pharmaceuticals and everything else, but their mind it hasn't changed from the allopathic system. They're still in that problem of translocation that you identified, and really, in our bigger picture here, this is not the direction we want to go in health. So to keep it onto my story, here I am, and amongst all these things, this is where I get introduced to homeopathy. Okay, as a patient, as an individual, I was looking to solve some of my health issues, some seasonal allergies and some other sensitivities, some issues were going on with exhaustion and fatigue, connected with food and other things. And I'm trying to sort this out. I'm a young adult, and I'm, one of my first jobs, while I'm at university, and I'm learning all these things. But for my own health, it's kind of, the big question, well, how do I solve my problems? I want to get rid of these symptoms. I want to feel better. I want to have more energy, all the things that were plaguing me. As I say, homeopathy is starting to come into my awareness, and I'm starting to look at some of the books and starting to try to understand that, but it's a little bit, it's a little bit of a complex system, so I'm not jumping in with both feet. I'm just kind of, I have an awareness, right? But meanwhile, I'm looking at supplements and, some of these more typical, natural modalities. So anyways, there I am. And to our ongoing conversation here with translocation and everything else, I had no clue at this point that, what I just said a minute ago, that I was still behaving allopathically without knowing it. We all think we're so smart, and I'm going to be better than an allopathic patient, and I'm going to get away from the pharmaceuticals, and look at me, and I'm doing something better and more advanced, and all this. But we're still allopathic. We're working at that level. As I say, I'm just getting exposed to homeopathy, and it's really what sets me up at that point in my life to discover and then pursue the broader system of Heilkunst and actually start to study it, to go to the college and take the full program and do all the years of study of that. But yeah, until I had these experiences, that door couldn't have even opened for me because I couldn't have seen it. And within all of this was the first time I went to see a homeopath, okay, like a professional consultation, and take all my case and give me a remedy and all this. And that itself became one of the most pivotal moments of my life and my development, and opening doors for me, opening my consciousness, was having an experience of the homeopathic remedy. This is where so many people may abstractly criticize homeopathy. Oh, it's just a placebo and it can't work, and blah blah blah. There's only there's no molecules left in the medicine, and blah 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 blah. I've heard it a million times, right? That's why I'm being so flippant about it. But in all seriousness, until somebody has an experience, and this happens so often, that the previous skeptic, for whatever reason, then they may try a remedy and have a mind-blowing experience, like mine, and boom, it's like now they want to know everything. It's like, how did that work? How does homeopathy work? How did that work for me? What's going on here? I thought it was bogus, but there's something very real there. Now that wasn't exactly my situation. I wasn't a skeptic, but I had no experience. So I had no frame of reference or anything else. So I go to this homeopath, have the consultation, get the remedy, and literally overnight, I was in the middle of hay fever season. Next morning I wake up, no symptoms. Of course, I've done over-the-counter drugs in the past, which I didn't like, to deal with the problems of hay fever and all the symptoms and everything. I was trying not to do that. So here I take this homeopathic remedy, as I say, overnight, no symptoms. What happened? This is what I'm asking myself. What's this? What happened? How did that work? And of course, the whole process before the remedy, the homeopath asking me all the typical questions, and I'm trying to reverse engineer. Okay, why is he asking me those questions? And he gives me the remedy. I'm going to look at the materia medica, and what is this remedy? Why did he pick it based on what I told him? And I'm just trying to reverse engineer the whole thing and learn, how does this process of homeopathy work? So all this, just to kind of give us our next chapter of my developing story, this was such a pivotal and essential moment in my whole learning and my whole evolution, was to have this direct experience of the remedy. Now, of course, I can talk about it conceptually. I know exactly, retrospectively looking back, exactly what happened. How does a remedy work? What is the law of similars? What are the two phases of the action, the initial action and the counter action? Like, I can riff off about all of those concepts now because I've learned it and I've understood it. But at the time, I was just living an experience. Not much of a map, not much of anything other than, wow, what happened? So back to your translocation, coming into studying Heilkunst and all the rest of it, yes, now I can understand that concept. I can explain it. I can explain all the things I just said, how a remedy works and everything else. But yeah, at that time, and it was the perfect time, as I said, as a young adult in my early 20s, it was the time to be open to really having a brand new experience, a brand new worldview, coming into me. And it's like, I'm going to find out about this. There's something quite amazing going on here.
Jeff, I know what you're saying. These are really important distinctions that you're making. So tell me, what is the most important thing that you want people to know about you and your practice, and what really resonates with you?
The first thing that pops into my mind, Paul, when you ask that,
is the idea that life, human life, and all of our activities, all the things we engage in, are have meaning at multiple levels. It's sort of like the literature student, someone who studies English literature or any language. They read these classic texts, the classic novels, and this is the whole mind of literary interpretation, is looking for meaning at multiple levels. That's the nature of art, right? But it's not exclusive to art. Art is just representing the structure of life. Life is multi-level, multi-meaning. Meaningful at multiple levels. So yeah, to your question, um, why am I saying this? Why am I talking about meaning at multiple levels? Well, similar to some of the previous part of our conversation, the the patient, somebody who's concerned about their health, wants to solve a problem. There's an immediate level of meaning in terms of the physical body, the physical symptoms. There's a wart on my foot. There's this. There's that. Like that's real and true. It's correct to say those things. It's correct to observe those things. But that's one level of meaning. And as I'm saying, Paul, to your question, I'm, in my practitioner mind, my diagnostic mind, kind of like the literary student, I'm kind of looking, well, what are the next higher levels of meaning if we raise our view to higher and higher levels, like in literature, the level of the themes and the symbolism and the character development, and you can kind of break the literature apart into all these different levels of meaning. Well, that's where I'm going in my practitioner diagnostic mind, is finding the next higher and the higher and the higher levels of meaning, and not just as an abstract literary exercise, but for the true purpose of healthcare, of getting to greater and greater and greater degrees of health. Right? You can solve the wart on the foot or whatever the physical problem is, but if somebody only stays at that level, here's my physical problem, give me the physical remedy, let's get rid of the problem, let's get on to our normally scheduled life. What's that the saying on television, back to our regularly scheduled programming. Well, okay, that's one level. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying it's incomplete to stop the thinking process at that level. So where I'm going with why I'm saying all this is the more that my practice has developed, that my practitioner view and my mind as a practitioner has developed, the more I want kind of a bigger and a bigger and a bigger and a bigger framework of the human being and of health. And we're not just a little wart on our foot. We're a vast piece of consciousness. Now, again, I know that just sounds weird to most people. It's like, oh, who's the weirdo who wants to talk about consciousness? I got a wart on my foot. Let's talk about the wart. Let's talk about reality here. I know that. I get that. But I'm saying is, the more I understand health, and even when we were talking just before about translocation, you don't want to shift the problem just to another place and not actually solve the problem. Well, yeah, we're saying something similar here. You don't just want to get rid of one symptom or a set of symptoms, even, or a chronic health, physical problem, whatever it is. You want to see in the patient an expansion of their consciousness. Now, as I say, I can't force somebody to have an expansion of consciousness, right? I get in there, right side by side with them, and okay, here's your homeopathic remedy for the foot, for the wart on the foot, and here's this, and so I deal with them at the level that they're coming to me at. If somebody comes and speaks to me in English, I'm going to answer them in English. If someone speaks to me in Spanish, I'm going to answer them in Spanish. Like, you meet somebody where they're at. So if somebody speaks to me in the language of physical symptoms, I respond in the language of physical symptoms, and I give the rem. So I'm not ignoring that level. All I'm saying is that the one of the greatest moments, and I never know when it's going to happen exactly, but you can sort of get a clue with somebody. But yeah, somebody who comes in at that pure physical level, here's my health, here's the problem, here's the symptom.
As I say, I meet them exactly at that level. Now, the point of all this, the amazing thing is, and it often can surprise me of who it happens to and when it happens in the process, but when that person starts to have an awakening, they you say either alongside the improvement in their physical symptom, or other parallel processes are happening, you can start to see the shift in the human consciousness. So as I mentioned a moment ago, yeah, we are a much vaster and bigger, larger consciousness than whatever is contained in our skin. Oh, here's my physical symptom, here's this, here's that. That's we have a very small physical body, as it were. But in comparison, we have a very vast, as big as the whole cosmos is our consciousness. So when these moments of awakening happen, as the old expression goes, that's why I get out of bed in the morning. That's what motivates me to show up in the clinic and treat another wart, treat another whatever. That's not the most exciting work in a sense. I mean, it's exciting when people feel better and their symptoms go away. I like that. They like that. We all like feeling better and getting rid of symptoms. But as I say, the real motivation for me is this idea of what gets me out of bed in the morning. It's these moments, these expansions of human consciousness, like, oh, I'm not just the wart on my foot. I'm something else. I'm something bigger. I'm kind of different levels of meaning and consciousness, and a human being kind of unfolding through different developmental stages, right? So these, as I say, I can't force that on. It doesn't work if you tried to force it on somebody. But yeah, when somebody has that spontaneous awakening, and I know how the remedies work. I know how they open those doors, right, to those expanding consciousness. But yeah, who is going to go through those doors? I don't really know. And I often get surprised. I think, somebody, oh yeah, they are so dense and mired in that physical. I can never imagine it's going to happen, but then it does. And they come in one day, and it's like, yeah, they may talk about some of the physical symptoms, as we always have those discussions. They kind of continue that story and how things have changed or improved or whatever. But then there's this whole other level to their conversation and their consciousness that wasn't there before. I'm like, I'll always say it to myself, and sometimes I'll say it to them. It's like, oh, you're in a bigger consciousness now. You never would have talked about this when I first met you, and you notice that your awareness is now going into these areas. So from my point of view as a practitioner, this is why I continue to study. I study the great, the giants, right? Of course, we have Hahnemann, who gave us Heilkunst and all these medicines and all the remedies. We also have Rudolf Steiner. We have Wilhelm Reich. Like, if you want big, big consciousness, those are your sources, right? Go to Steiner, go to Reich, and this is what I do every day. I keep going back to the well and expanding all this. So far from being just some kind of abstract philosophy, this is the most real areas that you can get into. Like, if we talk about getting into reality, reality is the vastness of the human being, the vastness of the mind and consciousness, the vastness of the human spirit. How it's like that old party game. What do you call that? I forget that. Is this what you call it when someone's doing the limbo and they're trying to, they keep lowering the bar, and it's like, how low can you go? Well, we're doing the opposite. How high and how expanded can you go? That's reality. That's the reality of the human being, of human health, of human consciousness. It's like, it just, the more you go into it, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Now, as I say, you can't force it on anyone. You can't expect anyone is going to follow that path. But this is the natural progression of healing and healthcare, is people find a bigger version of themselves, a bigger version of their mind, a bigger version of their consciousness. And that, like, as to what lights me up and where's the resonance in my practice, it's that dimension. Now, as I say, I don't ignore the word on the foot and all the, we dive right into all of that, but that's the bigger game that's really being played here.
Jeff, whenever I communicate with you, you always expand my vision of what's really going on. And I I appreciate that, and I'm sure others will too, because I mean that's, as you say, I mean that's really the name of the game. So let's transition to our last part. And why don't you tell everybody kind of what you're doing now? Because with these shifts and expansions in your consciousness, obviously your physical world will change, even in your practice and how you conduct yourself. And then, of course, why don't you go ahead and tell everybody how they can get in touch with you? Because, man, this is amazing things that we're talking about, and we'll go from there.
Well, thanks again. Thanks so much, Paul. So yeah, to kind of end up, you're asking me to kind of put a frame around, what's going on in my practice, what am I working on, these kinds of things. In a general sense, it's kind of true if I said that my practice looks exactly the same as it always has. Now, of course, I'm being a little tongue-in-cheek at one level, but it is true at another level. Like, I'm still doing the same Heilkunst process, the timeline treatments, and all the diet and the regimen, and all the practical things we do for improving health and getting rid of chronic symptoms and treating the sequential timeline. We have a very systematic approach, and my practice kind of looks the way it always has looked. People come in with specific physical symptoms and other health challenges and all these things going on, and I just deal with that exactly as they present it. Like there's no what do magicians say? Nothing up my sleeves, and there's no magic tricks or whatever. It's just the same thing that you would expect. But at the other level, as you've kind of sensed as we've gone through this conversation, everything is different underneath the surface, right? I say on the surface, it's exactly the same. But if you dig down, we've kind of gotten good hints as we've gone through this conversation. There's so much, so many concepts, so much philosophical depth to understanding the human being and what's going on that and as they say, I just keep studying more and more and more. So now when I'm facing the patient, doing this very practical work, I can now see things, and hear things that they say, see things and, how they express themselves and everything, that I see these different states of consciousness that, and I'm getting better and better at this. I can see exactly when a patient is ready for me to suggest opening a certain door. Let's go down this concept. Let's go into this zone of your consciousness, whether that's an emotional side or just kind of a worldview, aspect or any other thing. And we can start to go and open that door. And that's, I've sort of kind of talked about these ideas as we've gone through in our threads here. But yeah, this idea of what's under the hood is more and more kind of ripening in terms of what I see in the patient and where I actually lead them. So that's, as I say, at one level, it's all the same, nothing's changed here. And at another level, everything is new, everything is changed, everything, all these new threads are possible to open up now. So that's, as I say, just a very kind of overview answer. And my studies, my work keeps going down these rabbit trails. I keep digging down further and further. And a little bit, to some degree, I've documented this, on my social media channels and my blogs and things like that. But this is kind of my goal, in the next, however many years I got. I don't have that crystal ball, but yeah, to keep developing all these forms of education so that it just benefits whoever is interested in it, right? Because you never know, as I say, when somebody is ready for those doors to open. But when they are, I want to make sure we have all the resources, all the teaching materials, whether that's blogs, videos, podcasts, what have you, that those doors are available for people who are ready to go through them. So the simple way to find me online is just go to my basic clinic website, arcanum.ca, arcanum.ca, and we have a about us, and under there's practitioners, and you will find my name, Jeff Korentayer, and that's where you'll see where my blog posts are and my social media, There's a link to a podcast I do with my spouse, Allison McQuinn. We have some very similar conversations on our podcast, going into this deeper philosophy behind healthcare and behind Heilkunst. So you'll find that link there. You'll find some of the current projects I'm working on. Hopefully this year I'll finally get out my book on the remedy Staphylococcus aureus. It's a homeopathic remedy, although it's really a big Heilkunst remedy. And this book goes deep into that remedy, but it also, in book form, it outlines a lot of some of the deeper philosophies and the frameworks behind Heilkunst. So that will be coming. You can kind of get more news about that book when it comes out. And what else do I have on my clinic website pages? There's, as I said, the book, the podcast with Allison, and I've also recently started a Substack channel. I think that's going to kind of going into the future. That's where I'm going to develop a lot of this educational material. It's just kind of a fresh, modern kind of platform, and it just appeals to me as a good place where that's accessible for a lot of people to kind of come when they're interested in more of this. So as I say, on my website, arcanum.ca, find where our practitioners are, and I'm one of them. I'm Jeff Korentayer, and you'll find all my links and my social media. I'm happy to chat about any of this. Anyone wants to pursue any particular concept we've raised in this conversation, or just kind of get more of an overview of some of the concepts of Heilkunst, things like that. But again, thank you, Paul. Thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing this go out in the wild and seeing what kind of conversations it starts.
Well, Jeff, it sure has been exciting and informative to be on here with you. And so many people are going to find this to be such a blessing. And I hope they get in touch with you as soon as they can. But until then, I want everybody to be thinking about it. Now, you know as well as I do that you're nowhere near as well as you can be. It was once said that there's no fool like an old fool. So the older you get, if you haven't figured it out, well, guess what? You probably aren't. And it isn't about figuring something out. It's about being in there and hanging in there until you can learn what you need to learn. So that's what this is about. You need to find your healthcare hero, latch on to them, and help them not only to help you to feel physically better, but to feel mentally, emotionally, and spiritually better. So in your minds, I want you to think of this. We are creating community around love and trust, and of course, the truth. Because if it's not truthful, then it's just another belief, another mere notion, and of course, it's not gonna have much that it's gonna do to help you. So you can become well against all odds, and we're just putting it out there to you. So not only like and share this podcast, but start asking people about their health. And when you see someone who's in a real pickle, just ask them this question. Whatever they say their situation is, say, is that really true, or is that just what you want to believe? Because that question is powerful. And if their mind is open for just a minute, then that's the perfect time to refer them to your healthcare hero. And let's go from there. Love you guys. Talk to you later.